Gender representation on the boards of JSE-listed companies is better than it has been, but men still far outnumber women in top positions. This is according to research done by Business Engage. It included 247 companies, and I'm joined now by Colleen Larsen, who's from Business Engage. Colleen, thank you so much for coming into studio. Before we dive into the numbers, let's just get the perspective. How long have you been doing this survey? And what are the trends showing you?
So the JSE listing requirements to have a gender strategy for the board and report thereon started in 2011. And so we have been tracking that for the last 6 years and definitely are seeing an improvement. And but I think it is those trends that we are so encouraged by in certain of the aspects of our research.
Let's start at the top. Of the JSE-listed companies, there are 226 men compared to only 18 women. That's about 1 in 12 CEOs, not even, who are female. Right at the top, why don't we see more women?
I think, as women, we are looking at a revolution overnight. And it's definitely not going to happen overnight. It is a progress. If you look at the strides that we've made since the listing requirements came into being, we have seen a shift. But essentially, a revolution overnight is not sustainable. As long as we are moving in the right direction with the right category of people that we want in those leadership positions and not just the number crunching, I think in the future we will see the opportunity. Even if you look at the top about 205 men that we analysed, of those, 180 are over 65.
Wow.
If you look at the bottom 205 in age, those are 56% of those are women. So essentially what we are going to see is as those men start filtering out, there's opportunities for women. But you cannot look at it year on year. You have to look at the trends that we're seeing, because essentially what they call is this jump and bump. So essentially you've had a big jump in the first 5 years, and the 6th year, well, there hasn't been that much. And you look at it and think, well, there hasn't been much progress. But over the period, right, you can see the trend.
I mean, to what extent does this just really reflect the inequality that still exists in society and the reality that when it comes to children, women are predominantly still the main caregivers, and I salute all the men who are doing what they're meant to as equal caregivers, but the truth is women still take the heavier burden of childcare, and it is very tough at the top. A CEO job can be utterly all-consuming.
We look. If I look at one of the JSE-listed companies, not even the senior CEO position, there was a vice president position that was becoming available. And when that particular lady was grooming the next layer to come up, they all looked at it and said, absolutely not, we don't want that position. So I think where women sometimes get it wrong is we don't believe we can bring ourselves into those positions. We believe we have to emulate that particular person at the top.
Is that our fault or the fault of the boys' club?
Well, essentially, I believe that we've made it a women's issue in terms of this whole gender conversation. We talk about gender mainstreaming, and we cannot do it without bringing the men along. And I think that is where we've gone wrong, is we've tried to drive numbers, and we haven't driven the reason why we are doing it, because diversity makes business sense. If you don't get the 50% of your workforce into those decision-making positions, you aren't going to get it right. But we cannot drive numbers. If you look in our research this year, last year there were 17 companies, all male boards. This year we got 27. And that is when you start driving numbers. You're not driving the reason why you're doing it. So driving the numbers results in that churn, which we don't want to happen. We want to be consistent, deliberate, and move in the right direction.
If we look at our numbers globally compared, in fact, we don't look too bad. I think we're 20th on the Global Gender Gap Index of the World Economic Forum out of 146 countries. Iceland is number 1. I mean, Iceland just comes first in everything. So, that's as it is. Afghanistan is last, which I suppose is not surprising. Namibia, though, is 8th. But, you know, how do we measure internationally?
Well, essentially, if you look at the World Economic Forum, it's going to take 130 years to parity. So globally, we're not doing too well. And that is why I'm saying, you know, if you look at those stats, you would turn around and say, okay, well, let's just give up right now and let's not try anything further. And that's why, if you've got the right reason and the right steps in place to where you're going, and that's why we do our research. We don't do our research to take the negative and, oh, woe is us because we haven't had the opportunity. Where are those opportunities? If a company is saying, I'm 20% and I want to be 50% in the next 5 years, there's opportunity there. But you cannot take those opportunities when they're becoming available. We've got to plan for them, we've got to build the pipeline, and then we've got to let people know where their talent is. Because otherwise, you know, you're not going to get the position if nobody knows where you are.
You know, you spoke about it makes business sense to have gender parity and also race parity. It makes sense because different viewpoints build a stronger company. Do you think that we need, though, perhaps on some level, a fundamental redesign of how companies are run? Because it was built by men, by and large. And there are different ways of doing business. It's not always the harsh my way or the highway. That is changing, isn't it?
Absolutely. But also we need to know where the conversation must stem from. We are very particular that as part of a much bigger initiative that we run currently in 115 corporates. It's a collaboration of corporates working together. And unless your chairman, CEO and board is involved in the conversation, don't even start. Because that is where the DNA comes from. That is where your strategy comes from. So you can drive it as a numbers crunching, a labor thing and everything like that. But in the decision-making structures, that's where the DNA must be.
Yeah, and that buy-in has got to be there. Very quickly, do you still meet a lot of resistance?
On some fronts, but I must be honest, when you start getting 115 corporates working together, you're quite a big organization to contend with. And we like to inspire change, so the more we tell the inspirational stories about what's happening, the more companies come on board day on day.
All right, well, thank you so much for chatting to us. Less than 1 in 12 CEOs on the JSE board of listed companies is female. The CFO situation is a little bit better. I think it's 1 in 4 CFOs is women, but still some way to go, even though we are sort of on an upward trend. Thank you so much. That was Colleen Larsen from Business Engage. Let's have a quick look at